Hello and welcome. Today I'm taking a look at the Focal Stellia closed-back headphone. Uh, this is the top of the line beryllium driver model of Focal's closed lineup, just before the in the grand scheme of Focal, just below the Utopia. And yeah, it's this is a really nice headphone. Uh, as expected for the price point. It has this beautiful leather all over the headphone. These cups are gorgeous, beautifully hand. This whole headphone is beautifully put together. Um, these pads are incredibly comfortable. The fit is great. I mean, I like this a lot. The isolation is excellent. For a vented closed back. And yeah, the choice of design, with these concentric circles around this plate behind the vent is just really nice. I like it a lot. Some people think the color scheme is a little bit too much, but honestly, I think it works kind of well. Now, before I continue on with this review, um, I would really like to thank uh, Beach Hi-Fi for loaning me this unit, and not only loaning it to me, but letting me take it apart and show you guys what it's like inside. Now, aside from the headphone itself and the standard Focal 3.5 millimeter cable and XLR cable, and it does come with a 3.5 and quarter inch adapter, it also comes with this nice pouch here. Um, Very compact, very it seems fairly durable, and this would be a really great travel case. But that aside, let's get into this. So, continuing with the build, I've said what I like about it, but now I need to bring up some concerns. So, my first major concern here is that because Focal shares a platform between all of their headphones from the bottom level Elex and Elier all the way up to the this Stellia here and the Utopia, there are a lot of parts that are shared in terms of construction. Now, some of them deviate a little bit. The closed back models deviate the most for obvious reasons, but they still share a lot, especially with the basic design. So here I have another Focal headphone. This is the Match Drop Focal Elex. There are clear differences in the build. The fit and finish isn't as nice. There's no real leather here. The headband, this material is a little bit loose, while right here it's completely solid and stable. There are some clear differences in the way the headbands are constructed. Mainly in terms of the trim pieces, not the actual functional pieces. And so you get some weird overlaps, like, this this outer material is, well, actually, the basic chassis that this is built on is plastic. And on the Elex, it works fine. It's not painted, and at this price point, it feels fine. But I couldn't say the same for the Stellia here, which also uses this plastic, and it's painted over, and it feels a little bit cheap, and I don't like that at all. You can see some molding lines here. Yeah, it's not good. But I mean, otherwise the build quality is good. It's just that it's a couple of these oversights that they could have done with, I don't know, covering this with an aluminum sheet or something. But the actual trim pieces, this leather, things like that, it's really spectacular what they did here. But I still, because I am very nitpicky, I have more complaints. So once you get to the interior of this headphone, there are a couple things that stand out to me. They mounted the driver to the cup itself using these weird little plastic rails. Uh, and it's attached with these pogo pins, and if it loses contact with those and sound goes out, and I had issues with that when putting it back together. There's something covering it, so and pro tip, if your Stellia or any focal closed headphone loses sound at one channel, clean those pogo pins, because that's what's making contact and that's what could be misaligned. But that aside, uh, it's just a really weird system of putting it together. Right when you remove the baffle, the driver is completely exposed instead of being mounted to the baffle like most companies do. And the driver can easily pop off if you're not careful while putting it back together or taking it apart. Another thing is this hinge mechanism that they use with springs. That the springs they make contact with the baffle, and it's kind of weird, and they can get kind of loose and get in the way of the screw pulls, and they can get stuck there, and then you have to take it apart and you have to readjust the springs to make sure that that this mechanism works correctly. So as you can see here, it works fine. Springs back into place with mine, but it took me a couple of tries to get it to work again properly. So that got me a little bit nervous when I took it when I took it apart, but we're all good now. Now enough about the build. They could have done some things better, but that aside, let's get to the sound. Now, in terms of sound, this is probably one of the best closebacks I've ever listened to. Now, the problem with that statement is that the bar for closebacks is not very high. And at $3,000, I find this hard to justify. And I'll explain why. So going into the bass response, it has some issues, but generally it's punchy. It's fairly full sounding. There's a bit of dynamic range to it. What you'd expect from a Pistonic style driver, it's good. It's very good. It's fast, and it hits nicely. However, and this will be a common trend, there are tonal issues. So there's some weird dips that need to be compensated for through EQ, and sometimes it feels a little bit unnatural. But that's all I really have to say for the bass response. It's fast, it's punchy, it works well. Now, moving into the lower mids, I find sort of an odd recession there. I feel, actually, the mid-range as a whole, I feel is a bit is once again unnatural sounding. Now, I prefer a little bit of a more Harman style signature. However, if the timbre is good, and if you have something that isn't tonally perfect, like the emu teaks, the tonality is weird as hell, but the timbre works well, and everything's cohesive. This doesn't feel so cohesive, and it manages to feel kind of sterile, and there's some weird peaks in the mid-range, especially around the 1 to 2K region, and unless you compensate those out, something just sounds off about what you listen to. I don't like that, and the problem is that I wouldn't have a problem with this on, let's say, a $1,000 headphone or a $500 headphone, but this is a $3,000 headphone, and Focal should have really ironed these things out before really, making this a mass market product and charging more than almost every headphone on the planet for it. I don't see how this works. But yeah, things felt a little bit better when I applied EQ to it, and I got it more or less to a Harman response, but the timbre just wasn't there for me, and it didn't feel totally right. Something was off about it to me, and I feel that it was just this combination of this metallic timbre and being kind of closed in. It just made everything feel congested, and a little tonal issues here and there. It was generally just a weirdly sterile experience. The open back Focal headphones have a little bit of this going on, but they're really open, and the imaging is great, and the dynamics are better. and everything feels more lively on those, even something like the Elex. But here I just was not feeling any. I wasn't feeling that, and it's a real shame too, because I know they put a lot of engineering into this. That aside, there is also the treble response that we have to talk about, and I just wasn't a big fan of the treble on this, just like I wasn't a fan of the treble on the Utopia. It felt metallic, but it happens to also lack air to it, so yeah, it was a weird response. Once you boost the treble a bit, it's okay, but it still feels metallic and harsh. And again, I could tolerate this on much cheaper headphones, and a lot of this is nitpicking, but it's hard to ignore here when they're promising so much out of this headphone. They're promising a reference sound, they're promising the greatest experience you can have in a closeback. And while yes, I do think this is one of the best closebacks in the world, with the budget that they had, they could have really pushed the envelope with this. But I don't think they did. And so, and now with the Focal Celeste right around the corner, with the exact same build at 1/3 of the price and supposedly better tonality, I don't know who this headphone is for anymore. It's a wonderful headphone, but there's a lot of missed potential here. They could have made the build just that little bit better. They could have made the sound just that little bit more cohesive, but Focal didn't. And, well, that's that, I guess. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Please, I will link Beach Hi-Fi down in the description. Please check them out. The owner of that shop is a really great guy. And thank you once again for letting me try out this headphone and really get, a good look at it. Because, even if I wouldn't recommend it to buy, this is still, I think, something that's worth trying for almost anyone. There's a lot to like, but again, it's not a perfect headphone, and that's really unfortunate. But see you later.